Welcome to the Reign of God Now. This video will be the second installment on the controversial topic of Christian pacifism. Just a quick recap for those who have yet to watch the first video in the series. Christian pacifism is the position that it is wrong or immoral for a Christian to cause physical or psychological harm to another human being due to the fact that Jesus not only commanded pacifism among his followers, but he practiced it as well. In my first video, I addressed Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and his advocation of Christian pacifism. In this video, I will address the apostolic advocation of nonviolence. The apostles, recognizing Jesus' command of nonviolence, advocated for this paradigm themselves. The apostle Paul states, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Here we have Paul clearly indicating that our enemies are not flesh and blood. Rather, our enemies do not belong to this world. This is consistent with Paul's statement when he claims that our weapons are not worldly weapons. The conduct that Paul states believers ought to have towards their enemies echoes Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will reap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Nothing that Paul states in any of his letters can even remotely be used to justify a just war or just violence paradigm. Rather, Paul's letters can be used to support a pacifistic paradigm. Paul states, "Do not repay evil for evil." Paul goes on to explain what agape enemy love actually looks like. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. For if, while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son. Enemy love, according to Paul, using God's own example, is dying for your enemy. Enemy love obviously does not look like the intention to harm or kill your enemy. Now, Peter comes to the same conclusion as Paul, after he was condemned for using the sword in an effort to prevent Jesus' arrest. Jesus tells Peter that he can command a legion of angels to fight on his behalf. And in John 18:36, we are told that the reason why Jesus does not is because his kingdom is not of this world, or his servants would fight. Since it is not of this world, his servants do not engage in violence. As a result, years later, Peter writes, "To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he trusted himself to him who judges justly." Nowhere, anywhere, does Peter state that Christ retaliated via psychological or physical violence. As a matter of fact, Peter expresses the same theological thought that Jesus Christ bore our sins, and this was why we were still enemies of God. This is a tremendous departure from Peter's earlier action of using violence to defend Jesus from arrest. Now Peter is advocating for Jesus' non-retaliatorial paradigm. An objection is often raised, accompanied with the infamous Romans 13. Many Christians use this verse to justify violence. "But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment to the wrongdoer." What is imperative to note is that Paul differentiates conduct between a Christian, which is indicated in Romans 12 with the command to love our enemies, to do good to them, to not return evil for evil, and to leave the vengeance to God. It is then via Romans 13 that Paul specifies that the state or government is meant to be the means of how God punishes wrongdoers. So a Christian in the state or government is called to do two different conducts. Ergo, a Christian cannot serve in a function or role within the state that has to do with God's vengeance. That includes becoming a police officer or a soldier in the military. Rather, Christians have a separate function: to love their enemies, to pray for them, and to do no harm towards them. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, or subscribe below. God bless you.